Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's Learning and Families Committee. I'm not sure we'll do introductions. I think there's a hybrid here of people here in person in the chamber and also online. So if I try and introduce anybody individually, I'm going to forget somebody. So I'm just not going to do it. So welcome, everybody. Kirsten, do we have substitutes and apologies and stuff, please?
Thanks, Convener. We have an apology from Councillor Carr with Councillor Harvey substituting. We have an apology from Councillor Freshwater with Councillor Illingworth substituting. And we also have apologies from Margaret Conroy and Adrian Ferguson. We have a few members joining us online this afternoon, so when I call out their name, could they please confirm they're present? Councillor Illingworth.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Kigali.
Yes.
Thank you. Provost McDade.
Present.
Thank you. Laura Jane Gran.
Present.
Thank you. And Amber Laverty.
Present.
Thank you. All other elected members are present in the Chamber's convener.
Thanks very much, Kirsten. Declarations of interest from members, please. I'm assuming there's none, and therefore we'll move on to minutes of previous meetings for approving. I'm not going to read them all out. If there's any comment or question with regards to any of the minutes listed there, can you ask now? Councillor Cuthbert, please.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, in the JNCT minute, there's reference to the review of the instrumental music service, and there's a reference to the fact that there might be a group set up to look at this locally and so on. It's on page 12 under section 6. I just wonder whether or not that's actually going to go ahead, because I think it sounds like a good idea. It didn't have a conclusion in the minute. So,
Mr. McCluskey, please. Thank you.
The short answer is yes, Councillor Cuthbert. I think it's a good opportunity for us to look at the breadth of opportunity that we provide in Perth and Kilroy. So that is an action that we will be taking on.
Thank you, Mr. McCluskey. Thanks, Councillor Cuthbert. Any more questions or comments about minutes, or can we approve them? Thank you. Outstanding business statement. I don't know if you have anything to say, Kirsten, or will I just ask for comments and questions? Yeah, comments and questions, please. Comment, please, Councillor Cuthbert.
yes, I just wanted to thank you for arranging the workshop last week. I thought it was very useful. It'd be interesting to see what comes out of it.
That's very kind, Councillor Cuthbert. Thank you. I think it's useful. I'm biased, of course, having set it up, but I think it worked okay. And thanks very much to our officers who are sitting up the back for it. I thought it was really useful. Since you mention it, the next workshop that we do, and I haven't spoken to the professionals here, so apologies to them in advance, but since you mention it, I think a follow-up, the next workshop is a follow-up to what we did last week, might be beneficial if members are minded to do that. I think that would be helpful in terms of outcomes, and I think we got into some really good conversations, but they might be worth expanding on. I think if so, we'll have those conversations post the meeting, but that's very kind of you to say, Councillor Cuthbert. Thank you. If there's nothing more on outstanding business, Councillor Ahern, Bailey Ahern.
Thanks. Just on following on from what you've said there, I think, yes, a follow-on would be good, but I think an addition, because we didn't actually complete everything, because we were asking so many questions. So I think an additional meeting will be great to continue on what we were talking about, but also to talk about what we didn't talk about.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. I think it was really good, actually, that we got into lots of different conversations. Personally, I thought the question was really appropriate and good. That sounds really patronising. I should think of it a different way, but I thought it was really appropriate, and I think, and I really appreciate the time and effort that our officers, not least Fiona and Susie, went into putting the presentational bit of it on, and we did digression on a frequent basis. But I think it was a worthwhile digression, and that's in my mind. So we'll do.
Absolutely,
We'll
it certainly
do part two.
Generated a very good conversation, which I think we allowed to run on.
Yeah,
and I think, yeah, quite rightly so.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think part two, if that's the way to put it, we'll do again if that's okay with everyone. Thank you. Councillor, thanks. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. I wonder if we could have the slides circulated, because I wasn't able to make it to the session and I'd really like to catch up. Thank you.
Yeah, no, there were slides, and Fiona will make sure you get them. And it's always the thing as well that when you're trying to do workshops, and as councillors we're busy and we never quite get as many people there as we would like. But that's another reason for doing part 2, I think, Liz. So we'll try and make sure we can accommodate you with the next date as well, given that you weren't able to manage the first one. Thank you. If I can agree the outstanding business statement at this point before we move on to paper 5. Thank you. Paper 5 is reserved places in schools, and I don't know whether it's Cara. Mr. McCluskey, thank you.
Thanks very much, Convener. So this report is presented annually to committee to seek approval to reserve a number of places within schools which have classes with a limited number of spaces. Reserve places have been operational since 1997. This allows the council to take positive action to try to ensure that pupils moving during the school year can, where possible, still be accommodated in their catchment school by protecting spaces for local children. The proposed reserve places for 2025 to 26 is a positive and proactive measure based on the planned arrangements for class structures, which will be in place from August 2025. The reserve places will continue to be closely monitored and reviewed where necessary. The changes which have been proposed for 2025-26 have taken account of head teachers' views, historical and anticipated patterns of migration, and a knowledge of planned residential development. The report also informs the committee where primary class capacities have been temporarily maximised during school session 24-25 to allow catchment pupils to be admitted. We're joined by a number of officers today who are going to help support any questions, and primarily on this paper it will be a colleague, Karen Robertson from Finance, Business and Resources, who's the author of the report. Thank you.
Mr. Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, my question is, I'm trying to understand the report, if you like. I looked at Milnerthorpe Primary School, which has 28 reserved places, and the school, well, the census is shown as 230, which would give 258, but the capacity is 257. So what I'm not understanding is whether or not those reserved places are included in the roll census, or whether they're in addition to the roll census, and therefore we're actually predicting an excess of the number of spaces in the school.
Thanks, Councillor Cuthbert. Cara.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. It's neither, actually. So they're not included in the roll projections. I suppose one of the things that's important to understand is that although we are asking for reserved places to be authorised at committee today, sometimes they are already being used by catchment pupils, and the purpose of having this specified in the report today means that as children leave, spaces will then revert back to reserved places. So it's not a case that the reserved places would take the school over capacity at any point, but within each of the individual classes, these spaces may or may not require to be used by catchment during the year, but it wouldn't be a situation where the school would be over capacity unless there was the opportunity within the maximising class sizes, but it still needs to come within the capacity of the school. So there wouldn't be a breach, although it is tight in terms of the numbers there. There is still space within each of the classes, and the reserved places will try to ensure that children from within catchment should be able to attend throughout this session.
Thank you, Karen. Any further questions on this paper? And if there's not, I will move this paper. Sorry, Councillor Cuthbert. Thanks, David.
Thank you. Yeah, it kind of leads on from that last question, because clearly the school's going to be at capacity or near it. And I'm just wondering, does that trigger looking at the school to increase the capacity? Because obviously, if those are pupils within the school, then what happens when you've got more than that? Where do they go? And do we actually start looking at increasing the size?
David McCluskey, please.
So I suppose that's really a question about school estate, ultimately, Councillor Cuthbert, you know, in the sense that, you know, looking at the demographics across Perth and Kinross, ensuring that we've got capacity in each catchment area, each ward and in each part of a kind of geographical location. So that's part of the kind of future planning that goes on with colleagues in property and planning as well, to make sure that we're not in danger of doing that across the piece. So I suppose the short answer is ultimately yes, but that's a far more forward-looking piece of work to ensure that we have capacity across the estate in Perth and Kinross to ensure that youngsters can go to the catchment schools.
Dave?
If I could just come back on it, if you look at the Kinross Primary, that's got the highest number of any reserved places of any primary school. Northort's the second highest in the whole of Perth and Kinross. So I would like somebody to be looking at the area just to make sure we do have the capacity going forward. There's a lot of building work going on, even as I speak. So,
Karen?
Thank you. The capacities and the number of pupils attending schools is continuously under review. We have obviously met with the board members regarding the projected roles for the schools in Kinross and Milnathort. So these will continue to be kept under review as any changes arise. You are correct in identifying the number of reserved places within these schools as high, but that is to reflect the size and scale of the house building that is within the area, and that's the sole reason for that.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. Councillor Duff?
Thanks. Just for a point of clarification, in some of the schools there's obviously a lot of capacity, even in Mooney and Broadbent Academy. I think it's the primaries 156 on the roll, 302 of a capacity, and yet there are still reserved places required. So I just wondered if Karen could just explain so my understanding of that is clear. Thank you.
I think that'll be with regards to particular primary years, but
Yes.
Karen will know better than I.
Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose the starting point, Councillor Duff, is that whilst each school has a maximum capacity, schools are not staffed to that maximum capacity. Schools are staffed to the number of children who will be attending, and the classes are then configured. So although there is a lot of capacity, perhaps, or spare capacity in some of those schools, they're not set up to operate as classes as there's not sufficient young people. So when we are looking at the configuration of classes and the number of staff that will be allocated to a school based on the staffing standard, that may mean particular classes or particular stages, or if there may be composites introduced, that some of those classes may be closer to capacity, and that's the reason for reserved places, although there's sufficient capacity within the overall school should that number require to increase in the future.
Thank you. I definitely should have just let Karen answer that, shouldn't I? Thanks very much. If there's no more questions, I will move the paper this time. And I think I've been guilty often of just describing this paper as routine quite nonchalantly. And I think in many ways it is. But it's also really important, and I know a lot of work goes into it, and the reason that I think we become a little bit nonchalant about it is because Karen and her team are so expert at it and have been for so long. But it is important because it's not always possible for parents to have their first school of choice, but I think we do really well in Perth and Kinross that most of the time they do actually, and at the same time we make sure that when families move into the area they're able to go to their local school, and that's a difficult piece of work sometimes. I think we do sometimes take it for granted, so it's important today that we recognise that that's not easy and that you and your team do a great job of that. So thank you very much, and I commend this paper, and I will ask Councillor Frampton to second it, please.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Michelle. Any comments on the paper, or can we approve it? Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Convener. Just to echo your comments in support of, I know through my time as convener that becoming a little bit more acquainted with the dark arts of planning of capacities in schools and being aware of the legislation, etc. But then also those of us that have sat on the appeals committee know how much work goes into making sure not just that parents get the fair hearing, that the case is set out in front of them clearly, but there's a lot of compassion around it and trying to find solutions when it doesn't quite go right. So just to record our thanks to Karen for that too.
I think that's appreciated, Councillor Shaz. I think of the elected members here today, you'll have more experience in this regard than anybody. And actually one of the disadvantages I think of being the convener is you're not able to sit on appeals panels, which is not always a disadvantage given some of the harrowing tales that you hear. However, I did enjoy them because it did increase your knowledge and you were trying to do good things, I think. Anyway, thank you for those kind words. Can we agree the paper at this point? Thank you very much. We'll move on to paper 6, which is personal mobile device policy for schools, which will be introduced again by Mr. David McCluskey, please.
Thanks, Convener. I'm pleased to present the personal mobile device policy for schools 2025 to 2028. Digital technology is an integral part of the lives of children, young people and families, adults across Perth and Kinross. Used responsibly, digital devices such as phones and tablets can be powerful tools to enhance teaching and learning, communication and social experiences, and may remove barriers to learning for some children and young people. However, there's growing evidence base that when used inappropriately, digital devices are causing disruption to children and young people's learning and that of their peers. In August 2024, the Scottish Government published their mobile phone guidance for Scotland schools. This provided schools and local authorities with advice on the development and updating of local policies relating to the use of mobile phones and other digital devices in schools. Our personal mobile device policy for schools has been developed in conjunction with a range of stakeholders, including staff, children and young people, and their parents and carers, and is designed to support school leaders to implement approaches within their own settings. It provides clear information and guidance in the safe, responsible and legal use of mobile technology, supporting calm and inclusive learning environments that are fully focused on learning and teaching. It will support the appropriate use of mobile technology to enhance learning while protecting staff, children and young people from the consequences of inappropriate use and abuse. I am happy to respond to any questions in the policy, and I'm joined by other officers today who may be able to give more detailed responses.
Thanks, David McCluskey. Bailey Hearn, first, please.
Thank you very much. I'd like some clarity about what we've actually got in front of us, and I welcome the use of a mobile phone policy. But the first paragraph says the purpose of this report is to provide guidance. We then go on to a document that is labelled policy. And within that document, it then says that it's allowing schools to create their own policy for mobile phone use. So which is the policy and which is the one that's followed? And then you get on page 40 of the papers, paragraph 3.3, 4 bullet points highlighted as this is what you will do. And I quite rightly so, that's what they need to follow as policy. But I'm a bit, is this a guidance document for schools to produce a policy, or is it a policy document from Perth and Kinross Council that schools have to follow and then have their own policy on top of that as well? And which is the one that uses, and then if it is individual schools having their own policy, how do you then keep control about how individual schools are then implementing mobile use, bearing in mind that there are 4 bullet points out the whole document, which is ones that you're saying you must include?
David, please.
So I suppose the short answer to your 2 options where it's the latter. So it's a Perth and Kinross mobile device policy. So it's policy that we follow in Perth and Kinross. I suppose the box in 3.3 that you've pointed out are the absolute lines that we've agreed with all stakeholders that we must see in every school in Perth and Kinross. So, for example, we're saying in terms of classroom restrictions, the use of mobile phones and digital devices is strictly prohibited during lesson time unless explicitly permitted by the teacher for educational purposes. So that is, if you like, the Perth and Kinross policy about mobile phones in classrooms. I think it's important to recognise that one of the challenges in writing a policy like this is in implementing a policy that's implementable for ages 2 to 18 across a really wide learning estate. One of the things that we were really clear on was that we didn't want to undermine school leaders and actually school communities and their own local arrangements. So part of the work that we did was looking outwards at what school had developed themselves in the back of what was an acceptable use policy for all digital devices that came out around about 2015. And it's quite clear that the landscape for the use of mobile phones in a small primary school might be very, very different from that in a large secondary school. But there are some, and actually there's a lot of opinions around about mobile phones as well out there in the world. But what we tried to set out here were the goals that we wanted to achieve out of the policy, that we get clear agreement from and consensus around. And then actually, what would those minimum parts of a policy look like? And again, clear agreement and consensus. But we wanted to allow individual school communities the opportunity to perhaps have a more rigorous policy. But we wanted to set out that if they did that, then it was really, really important that they communicated that clearly and actually, undertook a full consultation round about their own school community about any additionality that they wanted to do. And I suppose the final part really was, and it's obviously a good point about, so what in terms of monitoring this, what we're going to do about this. So we are going to write a report on the impact of this. I think 2027 is to see the impact of the policy. Is it hitting the mark for what we need it to do? And then the policy comes back for review here in 2028 as well. It's been a really long time, probably as a local authority, since we have brought anything to committee, if indeed we have. I know there's been guidance out there, but nothing quite as rigorous as this. So now that we've done it, and given the pace that technology moves, we are committed to bringing that by here in 3 years' time and in 2 years to look at the impact that this is making.
Thank you, David. Councillor Kigali.
Thanks. Thank you very much for the report as a whole. I'm more looking for reassurance than a direct question on the report itself. It does feel very, very safety first and behaviour management feeling to me. And I am just slightly worried that potentially we're not being forward thinking enough here. There's no reference to AI, digital skills frameworks, future learning technologies, or teacher upskilling. And I'm just slightly worried that we might be too focused on the, rightly preventing harm, bullying, distraction, etc., and not focused enough on how this might be possibly a wonderful opportunity for young people who will move into a world of work where they are expected to be able to use their phones in a productive way, and that it's not just a distraction that must be kept turned off in your pocket.
David.
Yeah, and exactly that in terms of what the policy is seeking to achieve, and we've tried to be really clear about that in terms of the kind of learning environments that we want to provide in schools, and actually taking on board some of the research and guidance and feedback that we've had both nationally and internationally. So you're right to pick up on that factor of well-being and relationships, and I suppose that kind of good old-fashioned bit of classroom management and behaviour management in schools is really, really important. But you're also right about not taking a Luddite approach around about the use of technology and the opportunity that it has to open up learning within our schools and settings. So in the background to this, we've got an awful lot of digital work that's ongoing in schools, but one of the spaces that we do need to reoccupy is that of a digital learning strategy. So there's a paper in draft at the moment moving its way around about our own internal professional teams that will make its way to committee during the committee cycle of the next session. And I think that will give you some reassurance about that digital learning piece and that forward-looking and forward-thinking part about AI. It was really interesting to read a piece in one of the newspapers today about AI and what's perceived to be educational resistance to AI happening. And I'm not sure I entirely agree with that, but I think our first concern on every occasion, and I would stand by this quite rightly, is the safety and well-being of our young people. So we proceed with caution, we proceed carefully, and we bring that back here to committee.
Thanks, David. Councillor McPherson, please.
Thank you, Convener. My question relates really to the PKC consultation. So I referred to at the bottom of page 38. I noticed that the process involved consulting over 2,000 children. As I understand it, there's something like 18,000 children, 18,000 in the pupil population. So I just wondered how representative that 2,000, those 2,000 children were, something like 11% of the population. And did the consultation, was that open to all of those 18,000 pupils and that was just the number that responded, or was there a more targeted sampling process involved? Thank you.
So I think the first thing to think about is about the consultation process. And that consultation process and the way they did that involving children and young people was really framed around a bit of a classroom lesson and a guided exercise by a teacher. And it focused upon what young people felt was important to their learning environment, what they felt was important in terms of that well-being and safety and behaviour and relationships message in schools, and how they felt perhaps a policy where there were rules and structures around about mobile phones could support them in that. I would say in terms of the part about the kind of coverage of the questionnaire, we put that out to schools and we asked them to administer it. There was a bigger uptake from a secondary school population, because it's more of a live issue there in our secondary schools. You know, the truth of the landscape at the moment is that you know, many of our primary schools, you know, children don't bring mobile phones into the school, and I would say that's probably almost all of our primary schools have got that environment. Whereas in all of our secondary schools, mobile phones are there; they're part of life. It's part of almost a rite of passage of children and young people. It feels like that when you get to the age of going to secondary school, your parents buy you a mobile. So it's a far more live issue there. So we did have engagement from both sectors. In primary, it tended to be the older children in the primary sector, but there was more engagement from the secondary sector.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Councillor McPherson. Councillor Duff, please.
Thanks, and thanks for the policy. It's an interesting read and obviously a very topical issue, I think, in education at the moment. It'd be good to think that our pupils would adopt the policy and not breach it in any way, but it's likely that there will be breaches of some sort. I just wonder what the policy would be in relation to dealing with any breaches of the rules, as it were. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Duff. David?
Well, I think it probably goes back to Councillor Kigali's point about, you know, we're not here to demonise mobile phones because that's counterproductive in its own way as well. So what we don't need is something fresh and different round about those occasions when children and young people breach those rules. You know, we have a well-established relationships and behaviour strategy and policy within the council, and schools all have their own relationship policies as well. So if there is a breach of that, you know, that piece, then you would expect schools to respond directly by, you know, referring to the relationships and behaviour policy in terms of the same as they would with any other breach of rules really within the school. I think one of the things that we've been really clear about in the policy is that, you know, repeated breaches of mobile phone use can lead to a school leadership team asking for a pupil to hand over a mobile phone. You know, and you know, we have to also be really clear about the fact that when a child brings a mobile phone into school, or a young person brings a mobile phone to school, that's their responsibility if anything goes wrong with that. If a school takes possession of that phone, that becomes an entirely different piece legally. So schools have to consider that really carefully, I think, if that's somewhere they want to go down. And I think round about that whole piece, it's about consultation, connection and communication about what rules are, but that's really just an extension of a school's behaviour and relationship policy.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, and then we'll have Bailey Hearn's second question. Last call for questions, as it were, if that's okay at this point, but Councillor Harvey in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. I was just looking for the section, I've lost it there again. I noticed that there's a really interesting document, and I'd like the fact you've done it from a kind of highish level and allowed the schools themselves to develop their policies. But I noticed there's a kind of list of exceptions there as well. I assume that would be a list that could be advised to change depending on local circumstances and that type of thing.
Again, yes, and I suppose the thing about that list of exceptions was we quite a lot of discussion and debate both within our own central team and with schools. So much of the policy that you see was drafted out by a group of about 15 school-based staff with the support of central officers. So we wanted to ensure, you know, the enemy of putting out a policy that has clarity is the what about. So we wanted to flush out all the what about issues before we got there, and that actually people in schools were really clear that we hadn't missed any, but also that they were on board with those exceptions, if you like, those whatabouts. And some of them are obvious, and some of them maybe a little bit less so. But it's the field of technology, isn't it? So that by 2028, I expect other ones to be on that list of exceptions, because 3 years ago, maybe some of them weren't there in terms of the way we administer certain medications nowadays, for example. So, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, convener. My question, Seamus just died on me, but there we go. My question was around the, I note that it will come back to committee in due course, but it was about the kind of interim monitoring of progress and how that will be reported, and any uptick in complaints from parents, perhaps through our complaints process. So will that go through the normal monitoring? But also, what will be the opportunity to highlight the positives from it? Because I know my own teenager at school and another authority, I reported improved moods in classrooms, attention span. I mean, I know we all get distracted by the little thing beeping away in the corner. So actually, if it has that positive impact for them, maybe we should be doing it in the council. But you know, the more high level monitoring of the progress on it, and how that will be reported back through committee, whichever one's appropriate.
I think that's really important, Councillor Shires. David.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we've got a range of monitoring processes out there for what happens in our schools, but there's also that take the temperature piece as well. One of the things that we have committed to do is to, you know, that piece round about the impact of this policy in 2027. I think we chose that date really carefully because we wanted it to have the opportunity to have some bite and impact that we could actually report on, rather than, you know, coming back too quickly. But it's not that we're going to wake up the morning before the report needs written and do that. So there's ongoing stages of report, particularly for those schools, as you say, who are looking at this and perhaps considering what it will mean in their setting. We've begun those discussions already with school leaders. So, you know, we will be able to publish some reports, and we'd be happy to share that with all elected members about the journey of some schools who've moved to a different place perhaps from where they are at the moment. You know, because I think what I would also state is school leaders told us that they wanted a document that would be really supportive of them in this really emotive space. So we want to ensure that that's actually been the case as we move ahead.
Thank you. Billy Ahern.
Thank you. My second question is on the legal aspect of it, and whether we like it or not. Taking videos can be good, can be bad as well. But as an individual, having a video taken of you without your consent and posting it online is not illegal. However, there are areas where it does fall over to being illegal activity. And my question is, who is responsible for reporting illegal activity? If it's done in the school premises, is it down to the parent complaining? Because I can't see a school actually policing every video that's put online. Unless you get a complaint from a parent, you might not even know about it. So would a school then report it as illegal activity, or is it down to the family? And probably a supplementary to that is, how many times has a school in Perth and Kinross reported misuse and criminal activity of a phone to the police and action being taken?
But
so I suppose, and you're absolutely right, the legal consequences of mobile phone misuse, that they're really clear in the Scottish Government guidance, and we wanted to really reflect that in our policy. And in actual fact, in engagement with stakeholders, they wanted that to be reflected as part of the policy as well. You know, that said, you know, none of us are in the business of education to criminalise children and young people for the mistakes that they make, but there are legal consequences for certain aspects of misuse, and that's really important. I think in terms of responsibility and of reporting of a crime, I think that's a shared responsibility. You know, we all have that responsibility, and that includes schools and school leaders as well as parents and young people themselves. What I would say is that, you know, the publication of this policy and hopefully the agreement of committee at the end, that the landscape won't change. The landscape has been and has existed in terms of, you know, the illegal use of mobile phones, often involving video footage, to be quite honest. I would say you asked in terms of the number of times that's actually been reported to the police. You know, it has happened. It's not data that we keep and collect, but it's pretty infrequent, to be honest, that would be the case. But it does happen, and it's absolutely true that one of the things that we expect this policy to do is be really clear about that angle. And there's an educative part to the policy as well that we've not really probably touched on today. And that's not to say that schools don't currently educate children and young people around about safe use of technology. But what this policy does is it makes it clear that that's our responsibility, you know, and that shared responsibility for safe and legal use. So yeah, I think that's a really important question about when that line is crossed, because criminality, there's a responsibility to deal with that appropriately, and that's felt at school level. But parents will have that right as well, and as I say, as well, children and young people themselves.
Thank you. Can I have a supplementary?
Yeah, of course.
So my supplementary question to this was, do you think introducing this policy will reduce criminal use? And you said part of it there. So if this policy comes into place, part of it is going to be the education and telling young people that this policy is in place and telling them what is right and what is wrong. Do you think having this and doing that education is actually going to reduce criminal activity, and it's what we should be doing as an education and educating people in what we should be doing properly in life?
Yes, is the short answer. You know, that is one of the aims of the report, and I think we probably tried to spell that out in the green box. I think it's a green box near the beginning about what we're looking for, and that's round about. We focused more round about the kind of well-being of children and young people. You know, mobile phones used inappropriately, and it's not the device itself. It's the media or app that you're using, or the use of the device, can be really harmful to the well-being and emotional and mental health and well-being of children and young people. We recognise that, and we expect this to make a positive contribution to our overall health and well-being strategy.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson, and then the last question from Councillor Duff. Councillor McPherson, please.
Thank you, Convener. It's just a quick clarification, really. The policy is very clear that mobile phones are not allowed in class, and it does go on to say, or in any other areas as designated by individual school policy. Now, I appreciate it's down to individual schools, but generally, does that also include the school playground during breaks and lunchtime? Thank you.
And excuse me, the answer to that is not necessarily. So that's a question to be had within individual school communities. And it's also a question of, you know, being in education for a long time, there's nothing undermines trust in the system than an unenforceable rule. So we have to be ensured and be clear that whatever we are deciding as our shared, and let's call them rules or standards of behaviour within our school communities, that is something that we're actually able to enforce. You know, and I think as well, particularly when you're looking towards older children and young people, you would need to have good rationale around about the decisions you make, and you would need to discuss that with your stakeholders within the school as well. You know, Bailey Ahern's talked about some of the responsible use of mobile phones that happens in unsupervised spaces. And then there's something to be balanced up there, isn't there, with the kind of educative part about teaching people to use that responsibly rather than prohibiting. So that's why that's a complex space within that. I think everybody agreed, and when we engaged with schools and indeed all stakeholders, everybody said, you know, getting your phone out in a class and looking at that where you should be focusing on your lesson, and how hypocritical am I even saying that, because we all do it when we're on Teams meetings or whatever, but that's not conducive to good learning. So that's why that's there as an absolute red line. You know, it would be entirely appropriate that in some of our primary schools that mobile phones would not be used in a playground, and that's entirely right in terms of age and stage, but that might not be the right answer for some of our particularly older age group children.
Thank you. Councillor Duff.
Thanks. To a certain extent, I think the question I was going to ask has been covered by Mr McCluskey's answers to Bailey Ahern's questions. I thought one of the more telling bits of text in the report was that primary children have requested rules to support the use of mobile phones both in and out of school. which is quite interesting that obviously it happens all the time. I think I was going to ask you about are we educating our pupils in the proper use of mobile phones and the consequences of that. So to a certain extent, I think you covered a lot of that in your answer to Bailey Ahern. But I just thought that was an interesting comment, and I just wondered, what were the primary children's views about, the problems that they're experiencing with mobile phones.
Thanks, Councillor Duff.
Another part of the research, hopefully a slightly indirect answer to your question, but another part of the consultation that was interesting was we went out to parent councils to collate views of parents, and we did ask that question about whether parents wanted some support from the education system in managing that at home. And we didn't get a hugely strong response in terms of that necessarily being a need. But then we met with the parent council chairs at a regular meeting, and we discussed it in a little bit more depth. So that is a piece of work that we're going to take back to the next parent council chair meeting to see about developing something jointly round about that support piece that goes out. Because it's a complex, difficult landscape, isn't it? If anybody you have children or teenagers at home, you'll definitely know that piece. So I think there is that wee bit of support that we could give.
Thanks, Councillor Duff. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to move the paper now. It's always dangerous a wee bit to quote Dr. Robert Oppenheimer, given his optimism failed at the first hurdle, actually, in the most important of context, but I think this is appropriate. He said, deep things in science are not found because they're useful, they were found because it was possible to find them. And I think the point of that is that mobile technology is here, and it's here to stay. And we should, as Councillor Kigali alludes to, we should embrace the positive aspects of mobile technology, not least in a learning context, but also the peace of mind we get as parents through Find My iPhone, etc., the ability to communicate instantaneously on a walk home from school example, or where arrangements around football practice have changed and other extracurricular activities are available, of course. But this policy is designed to mitigate the negative effects of mobile technology, not least as an attempt to keep teachers and support staff authoritative in their classrooms. And it'll be really interesting, as you alluded to, Caroline, about how this changes things in terms of attainment, dysregulation, violence and aggression, bullying. And I think it is really important that we don't wait 3 years to report on that we consider that as we go along. I think that's absolutely right. Notwithstanding that, lots of our schools have most of this policy in place already, or many of our schools do. I think, and again, in response to Councillor Bailey Ahern's quite appropriate question, I think it is an attempt to allow school leaders to find solutions in their own schools whilst having a basic, consistent approach underpinning that. I think that's what it's all about. And I think we all must be really robust in our support for those school leaders and our staff in our classrooms in this regard. I think that's really important. Above all, I hope it allows space for our young learners to be kinder to each other, to be more Flynn, in fact. I am optimistic about this, and I'm happy to move the paper. I'll ask Councillor Frampton to second it, please.
Happy to second.
Thanks very much. Comments, please. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Convener. I know many of us are very concerned about the use and particularly abuse of mobile phones in schools. But having attended several parent council meetings in my ward over the last few months, I know there is a wide range of views among both head teachers and parents, particularly in secondary. So I do support this policy, and I welcome particularly the strong focus on safety and protection of the well-being of our children. So thank you to everyone who's worked on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Bailey Ahern.
Thanks very much. And yes, I welcome this report. I think it's going to do some good and move a long way into having proper use of mobile phones. My only additional comment to that is I hope that staff and teachers take cognizance of it as well, because one of the best parts of education is leading by example. Thank you.
I think you're quite right, Bailey Hearn. One of these days, I will not get halfway through the word council before I bring you in to answer the question. I'll remember your Bailey, and indeed, I found myself sneaking my phone back into my pocket halfway through that discussion. So we can all be guilty of that. So noted. Councillor Massey, please.
Thank you, convener. I fully support this policy as well, and thank you to everyone that has brought it forward. Excessive use of the digital devices has been linked to increased anxiety, depression and stress among our young people. This policy on digital devices in our schools can help promote a healthier, more balanced lifestyle and hopefully encourage pupils to engage in face-to-face conversations and interactions. Digital devices are often a source of distraction for pupils, with notifications, social media and games all competing for pupils' attention. Removing these distractions means that pupils can focus more fully on their studies, leading to a better academic performance. I believe without the distraction of the digital devices, pupils will engage more directly with each other, which may lead to having greater communication skills and better social interactions, which are essential for personal development and future success. And while digital devices have their advantages in an educational context, temporarily removing the use of them in schools can help promote a more focused, engaging and complete learning environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massey. The people who know better about these things than I do sitting behind you are kind of nodding their head when you were saying that, so you must be on the right track. Thank you very much. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, convener. And talking about those people nodding their heads essentially, I think it's been really helpful, the signposting of reading material to us as elected members so that we can be more informed when we go to parent council meetings, etc. The Jonathan Haidt work that was referenced has been really helpful in actually having a more deeper understanding, so you can speak from a place of knowledge. So thank you for that advice. Very much welcome this report. I think it strikes a really good balance between the recognising the situation we're in right now, but also look forward to the digital strategy paper, because we do want to make sure that our young people are really well equipped for the world of work and recognise that technology and mobile phones and digital resources are really important in that. But especially welcome the empowering of our head teachers and senior leadership teams in schools, because they're the ones at the coalface, but they actually understand the context that they're working in. So I think you've struck a really good balance in doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. And you were right to point me in the broader sense to Gareth Southgate's thing as well, which was really interesting. Who knew an England football manager could be so sage? That was really discombobulating for me, but there we go. Thanks, everyone. Can we agree the paper? Thank you very much. We'll move.
Thank you, convener. So the Children and Young People Scotland Act 2014 defines corporate parenting as formal and local partnerships between all services responsible for working together to meet the needs of looked after children, young people and care leavers. The 2014 Act introduced new duties and responsibilities for Scottish public bodies defined as corporate parents, effective from April 2015. So a good corporate parent will want to ensure the best outcomes for their looked after children, accept responsibility for them and make their needs a priority. The Act also states that each corporate parenting body will publish a plan which will set out how they will meet their responsibilities. We are therefore delighted today to present the most recent iteration of the Corporate Parenting Plan 2025 to 2030. The plan has been designed following consultation with young people, views from the previous plan, consultation with partners and a review of national policy. The actions within the plan are not exhaustive, but show where further work needs to be undertaken and a particular focus for development over the next few years. The actions will be overseen by the Promise Delivery Group and will be reported annually into the Corporate Parenting Subgroup of the Children, Young People and Families Partnership. Convener, I have today Linda Richards, who is our lead for corporate parenting in Chambers, who will be happy to take any questions in relation to the paper. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Aaron, and welcome, Linda. Any questions? Councillor Massey.
Thank you, convener. It's about the looked after children. I noticed that the rate in Perth and Kinross has fallen, but not only in Perth and Kinross, but in Scotland, the number of looked after children is falling. Is there a reason that this is happening? Is it because we're giving more support to the parents or the guardians of these children? Just really want to know if there is any reason that you can think of that this is happening.
Linda.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Massey. And I suppose there is not a simple answer to that, but really a variety of methods. But yes, you're absolutely right. I think the introduction of whole family wellbeing funded projects, particularly in Perth and Kinross, has helped support children and young people to remain within their birth family at a much earlier stage, so allows for those crisis points to be reduced and I support supports to mitigate any risks. I think there's also a contribution fact in the number of kinship carers that are also coming forward. So family group decision making that we have developed within Perth and Kinross has really enabled families to identify the supports to support each other, and therefore our job is about supporting that whole family unit. And I think that in addition allows for children, young people to be placed within kinship arrangements and kept within there and legally secured through a Section 11 residence order, also known as a kinship care order, which is not a looked after status. So although we're talking about looked after numbers coming down, we still see a high number of young people who require our support, but the legislative base is different.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks, Councillor Massey. Councillor McPherson, please.
Thank you, convener. My question relates to residential placements. I note that there are 15 young people that are currently in residential placements. And I just wondered, are there any of those within Perth and Kinross, or are they all out of county placements? And if so, what's the sort of furthest away that that a child is placed? Is that possibly the placements in the rest of the United Kingdom? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McPherson. I can say to you that there is one young person that is placed within a residential school, which is within the Perth and Kinross boundary and is a jointly funded placement with care and education. The remainder are out with our council boundary area, and the furthest away would be Aberdeen.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks, Councillor McPherson. There are no more questions, so I'm going to ask Councillor Frampton to move their support, quite frankly, because she does most of the work in this area. So please, Michelle.
Thank you, convener. The Corporate Parenting Plan seeks to ensure that all partners across the Children's Services Planning Partnership keep the interests of care experienced children at the heart of their work. The plan before committee today recognises that a lot of the actions from the previous plan have become business as usual and are being embedded into practice. The new plan identifies those areas that continue to require an additional focus to make a difference. Whilst the Corporate Parenting Plan sets out the ambitions of corporate parents, these cannot be in isolation to what children and young people have told us is important to them to have included in the plan. I am pleased to see the extensive consultation that has taken place with both partners and children and young people, ensuring that accountability for progress against the actions in the plan will be to the young people. I am confident that we have the right reporting structures in place that will continue to monitor and review the plan and report back to this committee on an annual basis. I move the report.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm happy to formally second. Any comments? Councillor Shires.
Thank you, convener. Just briefly to thank everyone that's been involved in pulling the plan together, even before the promise became a national commitment. I think in Perth and Kinross, Linda and her colleagues and Aaron and Sheena Devlin and all the people that have been involved have already been doing a version of what has been, become now national practice. And I think that's important for us just to remember that, that it is now business as usual, built into the business as usual, but actually it's what we were doing anyway. The emphasis on the voices of young people throughout the plan is really important. And I'm sure they will be quite plain speaking in making sure that officers know what needs to be improved and what's going well. So I also welcome the amount of reporting on this that's gone to the corporate parenting subgroup, to the children, young people, family partnership, where partners are around the table, just to make sure it's kept front and centre.
Thanks, Councillor Shires. I think you're right. I know one of the earliest interactions I had in this committee was with the fine young individuals, and it was really good work, serious work, but good work nonetheless. And I know in the last term the work was led well by the previous convener, which is you. So thank you for that as well. Can we agree the report? Thank you.
Thanks, convener. In the Learning and Families Committee on 29th January 2025, it was agreed to establish 8 additional intensive support provisions, or ISPs, with implementation in 3 phases over the next 3 to 4 years. At that meeting, it was agreed to progress to statutory consultations and development of 2 secondary school ISPs as part of the Phase 1 delivery. The report being considered today provides details of the options appraisal for the development of a 3rd ISP plan for Phase 1. It sets out the recommendation to develop an ISP in Viewlands Primary School, which is one of the Perth City primary schools in the Perth Academy cluster. If the recommendation is agreed, then this proposal will progress to statutory consultation following the break at Easter. As with all statutory consultations, it must be open to the public for at least 30 school days and will include a public meeting. Following review of the findings by Education Scotland, the recommendations and the establishment of the ISP at Viewlands Primary School will be brought back to a future meeting of this committee. I'm joined by a range of officers who will be able to answer your questions on this paper.
Thank you, David. Billy Ahern.
Thank you very much. We're often accused in this authority of preempting the results of consultations and things. And this is not an additional supports provision for Viewlands Primary, because it actually says later on that this is to prepare or to implement an additional ISP for Perth Academy catchment area, with Viewlands being one of the options. So you could be accused of entitling the document as ISP provision for Viewlands when it's actually RDM is one of the options, and so is another catchment school in the area. So just wanted to clarify that don't label the document as one of the options, which is your preferred option. And I'm not saying whether I agree option 1, 2 or 3 is right. Thank you.
Oh, it's a fair point. I'll not ask anybody to answer it other than that it's noted, I think. Thanks, Chris. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, convener. Just wanted to ask one of the questions about Viewlands, which is obviously your preferred option. Is there, with the growing needs for ASN requirements, is there more space to expand in the future there? Would you think if that continues to rise?
Fiona, please.
As Councillor Ahern rightly pointed out there is more than one catchment school that would have an ISP. RDM already has an ISP, so between the 2 schools, then we would anticipate that would be sufficient to meet the future need. Recognising that as a council we are responsible for allocation of placements across any of our area schools within any of the areas. So although we were through this movement and development, we're aiming to have children within their catchment schools, we actually have the ability to be able to place within any school within Perth and Kinross, and that's important that we keep that clear in the proposal.
Thank you both. Councillor Barrett, please.
Thank you. It's kind of a follow-up on what Councillor Harvey asked. I noticed looking at paper 5 that it looks as if there's headroom capacity in Viewlands Primary, so putting this in there isn't going to take away any kind of ordinary teaching space. So that's kind of question 1. And question 2 is, does that also mean that if there's increased need later on, we could further increase the ISP at Viewlands if Viewlands is the, I mean, I can, you know, I'm supportive of the policy that we should increase ISP provision, and I appreciate the arguments in the paper for Viewlands, which of course is in my ward. So I am very supportive of that, but I was just looking to the future and the capacity. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Barrett. Very legitimate questions, I may say. Fiona or Sarah, maybe, please. Thank you.
We will always keep an overview in terms of that and look at it at any of those, any need to have further provision. Look at that with property. There is space at this point in time, but again, I wouldn't want to preempt what other developments there might be within the school or any changes within the number of other pupils that there are. But at this present time, there is sufficient capacity should that happen.
Thanks, Fiona. Thanks, Councillor Barrett. There are no more questions, so I'm going to move this paper. And as I've said before, I'm genuinely really excited about this stuff. We had a good meeting, I think, on Monday night at the high school for the consultation there, with lots of interest, lots of pertinent questions asked from parents, etc. The meeting reinforced my belief that we are on the right track here and that our officers are on it, as it were. And I mean that without patronising anybody. I thought it was a really good meeting, and I think the representative from Education Scotland told us that after as well, actually, which was really nice. But it's important that update papers come regularly to this committee for scrutiny by members and the public alike. And today's paper proposes Viewlands Primary as the local primary ISP for the catchment area of Perth Academy for the first time. So, but I'm delighted and excited to move this paper, and I'll ask Councillor Frampton to formally second it.
Okay. Happy to second it.
Thank you, Councillor Frampton. Any comments, please? Baileyhan.
Thank you very much. And I agree, this is an important paper. And after listening to some of the families on Monday night, it is a particular area that parents are really involved in, they're really concerned about. And unfortunately, it's only an area that's going to increase. So we may be here in a couple of years' time looking to increase our ISP provision elsewhere as well, or even indeed at Perth Academy again. So yeah, I welcome this paper. I welcome the options, and yeah, we just need to take a license that this is the beginning. Well, we're in the middle, or wherever you want to be, of something that's going to be increasing our schools. Thank you.
I think you're spot on. I think this is a long road. I think we're going in the right direction, but it will be a long road. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Councillor Shires.
Just briefly, to welcome the paper. I had the opportunity to visit Perth Academy and Viewlands as part of the Scrutiny Performance Committee review, and hearing about the issues around transition. So having ISPs that are as close to the high school that a child might go to, I would think is a really good move, and makes a lot of sense based on what we saw and heard that day. So I think it's a really interesting proposal, and look forward to the future papers.
Thanks, Councillor Shires. And I think in terms of the Scrutiny Committee, it's really important as convener that I don't interfere at all, but I have paid attention to it, and I think it's really good work. I think it's really helpful in its own right, actually, and it's maybe pertinent to say that here. But thanks everyone for the good questions and the good comments. If it's okay, we'll agree the report. Thank you very much. We're not quite finished today, actually. There is an item 9 which came really late on yesterday, and there's with some degree of sadness that we learnt that Mrs. Jill Dugan's gone on to things at Edinburgh. So I was about to say better things, but that's you know. But I just about stopped myself. But it is effectively a promotion, so I'd just like to pass on my congratulations, and I hope the committees. I think you've been in Perth and Kinross 33 years. Would that be right? So fair play to you for making such a bold step. I am sure you'll be wonderful in your new role, but nonetheless, we will miss you here. I've known you longer than my 8 years as an elected member, as you know, so it's particularly sad for me that my boy's head teacher is now no longer going to be with us. So from a personal level, I'm really disappointed about that, but I wish you genuinely all the best. Councillor Barrett, please.
That is sad news, but good news for Mrs. Dugan, and I'd just like to add my thanks and congratulations and best wishes in her new role. But thanks for everything you've done. I know I haven't worked with you very long, but it's been good.
Thanks, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Shires.
Yeah, just to echo your comments, we'll miss you, Jill. All the head teacher interview panels that we've sat on endlessly over the years. I don't maybe get time to add them all up, but you've always offered us really sound, sage advice, and I'm sure our loss is Edinburgh's gain, so we'll look forward to you visiting us occasionally, maybe.
Thanks, Councillor Shires. Best wishes. Thanks, everyone. Much appreciated. And we'll have we'll have, for those of you that are on executive sub, we'll give it 10 minutes or quarter of an hour or something, and we'll come back.